Okay.
Good morning, people. Good morning, everybody. We're live on Zoom, and we're also live on askasbdc.com. The only way you can interact with us, of course, is in Zoom. And we would like you to do that in the Q&A part rather than in the chat. For the chat, please reserve that for if you need technical help. Maybe just hit the raise hand button in the middle of your screen, and then I'll contact you and see what technical help you might need. Put your questions in the Q&A rather than in the chat. And before you put them in the Q&A, just look and see if there's any other questions in there already, because if there's a question that's close to yours, it may be worth just upvoting that one. But when you put a question in the Q&A, please make sure you're referencing which type of program it's from. Is it PPP? Is it EIDL? Is it the state guarantee? Is it something else? But please be as clear as you can in your question, and that will give us a chance to give us the best chance of an answer. Okay, I think that's pretty much all the things that I need to say. Who am I handing this over to? Scott? And who? Somebody else take it from here.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much, Alan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Rogowski from Northern California SBDC Network, Small Business Development Center Network. Thanks for joining us on this morning of April 29th and for our small business COVID update. As you can see down here, we are all in this together. All right. So Northern California SBDC, we're funded by two major partners. We're mostly funded by SBA, Small Business Administration, and then are also, that's federal. They're also state funded by the Governor's of Economic Development Office called GoBiz. So we have two major funders, and thanks to these funders, we come to you at no cost. So we can help you navigate this disaster situation, navigate the loans, navigate how to put your financials together for you at no cost. And it's 100% one-on-one and confidential. So the Finance Center, we're a division of Northern California SBDC Network. We cover the most 38 northern counties of the state, from the Oregon border down the coast to Santa Cruz, all 9 counties of the Bay Area, southeast as Stockton, then back up through Nevada and Oregon border. And the Finance Center, we're a team of 50 advisors, financial expert advisors, and we specialize in helping businesses get loans. Before COVID, we would help you start a business with capital, buy a business, buy a building, stuff like that. But now during COVID, we are helping you navigate the arduous and unknown process of these disaster loans for you at no cost. Again, my name is Scott Rogowski. I'm the director of the Finance Center for NorCal SBDC. We have Sunita Maharaj. She's our associate director of the Finance Center for NorCal SBDC. And then also we have Ann Johnson-Strongberg, who is the associate director of Northern California SBDC Network for programs, and she is going to do the Q&A after I speak and go over some updates. So disclaimer, things are changing all the time. This information was correct when we put it together, but things are changing all the time. We have a few disclaimers in here. These are some of the questions that we get mostly, the most FAQs that we get. So we have 4 bullet points here that kind of explain. So do not hesitate to apply, either for the EIDL, which we'll go over what that means, or the Triple P when it comes available again. The Triple P has money right now. You can apply today. The EIDL is supposed to go live sometime this week, so hopefully. And then you could reapply for the EIDL or apply if you have not reapplied or applied originally. So always check if you have an ownership structure where you have a lot of investors or a lot of people that own multiple shares, or minimal shares, and you have a lot of people. Please check with them, your investors and your partners, before you take these loans. If you are some sort of tech-enabled business and you have a lot of investors, please check with them. They may or may not want you to take out these loans. So we don't have access to check the status of your SBA EIDL loan request. So we ask you that you be patient. So SBA states that, when they shut down the web portal a week ago or week and a half ago, the people that were in the queue, if you applied after March 29th and you haven't heard anything from March 29th to today, they are going to get to you and process your loan request. You just need to be patient a little bit. And then if you applied for the PPP and you're waiting on a bank to get back to you, you need to call them or go down and talk to them and find out if you have an SBA loan number from eTran, which is an internal platform for SBA. Do you have an SBA loan number assigned to you and your loan request with that bank? If you do not, then we need to help you reapply somewhere else, or sorry, apply somewhere else, because those monies are going fast. But there are other lenders that we're going to talk about today that have PPP money. So, you know, I forgot to change the title on this because this came out Monday, not today, but we're still talking about it, still new funding. So there's about $380 billion that was new to the new tranche of monies that are available, and 320 went to PPP. 260 billion is open to all businesses to go to their banks and apply. 60 billion is specific for certain lenders, community-based lenders, small banks, credit unions, mid-sized banks. 30 billion for community-based, 30 billion for mid-sized banks. So we have actually found out about one of these community-based lenders that we're going to talk about today that is lending up to a certain amount for non-customers. EIDL, there's a $60 billion, about 50 billion is in loan reserves in case some of these loans go bad, and 10 billion is for that advance, that forgivable part. So that's the 380 billion broken up very quickly. Loan overview, so there's the Paycheck Protection Program. I call it the PPP, it's a little easier to say. There's Economic Injury Disaster Loan, also easier to say EIDL. There's the loan, and then the EIDL advance, which is the forgivability part. So there's SBA loan support. So if you were to get a business loan right now, that's not a disaster loan, like that's a regular 7A or a 504 loan, a building loan or land loan or expansion loan or buy a business loan. SBA will automatically pay your principal and interest for the first 6 months, which is a really awesome deal. And then SBA will also automatically pay the interest fees of any other microloans that are funded prior to September 27th. In the state of California, there's a sales tax deferment that you could potentially take advantage of from now to the end of the year. Just need to check with the state on that. And then also there's iBank guarantee loans. So those are state guaranteed bank loans. SBA is federal, and SBA is backing the PPP loans, and iBank is state. So iBank, as state of California, is backing the state guarantee loans, which we'll go over in a little bit. All right, so the forms that are needed for the PPP and calculations, there is a universal form. It hasn't changed for the last 3 weeks or so. So you can get it on the Treasury's website, or you can email us here and we'll get it. We'll get that for you. So you can start filling it out. It is a universal form. Each lender is going to have their own forms and request their own different financials. There are some constants in there. So if you are a Schedule C, if you have a file Schedule C, you have a 1040 personal tax return and a Schedule C where you run like your business on there, whether it's where you're not a legal entity, you're not a C Corp or an LLC or an S Corp. You have a Schedule C. That's for anybody that's a sole proprietor, self-employed, or receives a 1099. So if you're applying for the PPP as a sole proprietor, you need to gather your 1099 that you have for the 2019, and that's going to help you figure out what you qualify for. All other entities need to get together their 2019 W-2s, the whole year, all your W-2s for the whole year, your 941s or 940s, which are your quarterly payroll reports. You need to get all that together as well. Sole proprietors, there's a lot of questions around sole proprietors. When the PPP launched on the 3rd of this month, the sole proprietors weren't allowed to apply until the 10th. So there's new findings with a sole proprietor. And to calculate your loan amount or your forgivability amount, you take line 31, which is your net profit or loss. And to do your loan amount, you divide it by 12, times it by 2.5, that's 2.5 months. That's like all other entities, they qualify for 2.5 months of their payroll costs. Forgiveness for a sole prop is you take line 31 divided by 52, multiplied by 8, and that's 8 weeks of forgivability. So what's forgivable with the triple P? It's 75% to 100%. I guess I forgot to read this before I wrote it. It can't be over 100%. So 75 to 100% on payroll costs is more likely going to be forgiven. If you want to do what the ratio is that a lot of other people are talking about is 75% on payroll costs, which includes all sick, medical leave, employee salaries, compensations, bonuses, if that's common for you. And then you can spend 25% or less on rent, utilities, or interest debt payments. If you want to combine the two, this is how you can combine them. If you want to just spend the money on payroll, then it's more than likely going to be fully forgiven. The forgivability part of it comes from the lender, not SBA, not us. It comes from the lender. SBA is going to hopefully submit something this week where we'll find out more about that, the forgivability part. All right, so lenders. If you're a lender, if you bank at a big bank, top 5 banks, and you call them and ask them where you are in the queue, that's the most important thing for you to find out, because you may be 100,001 in the queue, and they're probably not going to be able to get to you or process your paperwork. So if your bank is at capacity, they're not taking any more applications, or you're really far down the line, then you could go to sba.gov/paycheck-protection/find, type in your zip code and find lenders near you. Or you could look at this list that we kindly put together. Myself and Sunita from the Finance Center team, we have great resource partners across the state that have vetted most of these. We have vetted the other ones. And you do not have to be a customer to apply at these lenders. So lendistry.com, they're in Southern California. You can apply up to $250,000. Opportunity Fund, they're in San Francisco. But both these companies, Lendistry and Opportunity Fund, they do statewide lending. Actually, all these lenders on here do statewide. Opportunity Fund is a nonprofit lender based out of the Bay Area. They'll do loans up to $150,000. They just launched this yesterday. We got word. So we have the link for that we can send out, and we also have the parameters within it as far as what we're looking for. So all the other ones: Funding Circle, United Business Bank, T-Bank is Texas Bank. They're not here in California, obviously, but you could still get a loan with them because they're a national SBA 7A lender. All right, so we talked about the forms that you might need for the Triple P. These are the forms that you maybe needed for the EIDL after you apply or before you apply. If you're getting ready to apply because they're launching a new portal, then we recommend that you work with our SBDC advisors at no cost and start getting some of these documents together to make the process easier and to make the funding better odds for you. So there's these forms. You are going to have access to these slides, so you can study this. If you have extra questions, you can reach out to us and we can assist you. So for the state guarantee disaster loans, the only way that you're eligible as a business owner for the state guarantee disaster loans is below here where you see the eligibility. Probably should be flipped next time. But the eligibility within this is if you do not qualify for an EIDL or a Triple P loan, for whatever reasons, the only reasons that we have been able to figure out, as SBA is not posting reasons for declines, there's not a long list like there normally is when you traditionally apply for a regular business loan. But these are the reasons that we've seen people be disqualified for. So credit issues, and there is no specific credit score that's being posted. So we don't know the minimum credit score. It's actually a blend of your personal credit and your business credit score. And it's an internal calculation made by SBA. So if you have credit issues, you have a non-US ID, you're a 501c6, there's a caveat with the 501c6 where if a majority of your income comes from lobbying, then iBank may have to do a different qualification for you as an entity. But if you're 501c6, you don't qualify for the EIDL or the triple P. You don't have payroll as a self-employed individual, then you wouldn't necessarily really qualify for the triple P. Also, if your Schedule C line 31 shows a negative, then you do not qualify for triple P. And if you have any delinquent federal loan liens, whether it be with SBA or a student loan, you do not qualify for a triple P or an EIDL. So if you do not qualify and you have questions about receiving one of these microloans, you can go to ibank.ca.gov to find that out. If you want to get a loan that's up to $1 million for a state guaranteed disaster loan, you could reach out. If you're Solano South in our region, you can reach out to Chris Horton. He's one of our financial advisors, but also does some work for the NorCal FDC Financial Development Corporation in Oakland. And YOLO North, you can email us at loans@asksbdc.com, and Sunita and I will get you to the right lender or help you put your financials together for that. And that's the state guaranteed loans. Here's how you get a hold of us. This webinar that we're on right now is being live streamed on our website at asksbdc.com. That was put together by our marketing director, Aaron Phelps. He and his team, Caitlin, did a phenomenal job putting together our branding and our messaging on asksbdc.com. You can email us at loans@asksbdc.com, Espanol, if that applies to you, at asksbdc.com. You can also call us and get a live person at 833-ASK-SBDC. A lot of different ways to contact us, maybe more than you really have ever thought about, but there's a lot of great things on asksbdc.com. There's a chat bot, there's a questionnaire that you can sign in, or you could email us. A lot of great things. You can contact us from all over. And then also SBA disaster contact info is below. If you have any questions about your loan, we ask that you can email them here. You ask that you put your loan number, which hopefully starts with a 36. Put that in your subject line, ask some questions. You can call this number if you like. Calling on the weekends is best because they are 24/7, but the weekends are best, or really late at night. So thank you very much. Again, my name is Scott Rogowski. I'm going to stay on to help out with the Q&A, and now I'm going to hand it over to Ann Johnson-Stromberg.
Thank you, Scott. I was recently messaging with a friend, asking her why she was participating in this training again for like the third time, and she's like, I'm just getting twitchy about my EIDL, about the EIDL. I haven't heard anything. So this is for you, Markel, and for all of you who are out there waiting for news on the EIDL. The update is that if you haven't heard from SBA, that doesn't mean that you're not in the queue. Noah, can I just ask you, can you confirm whether or not everybody who applies, if they don't qualify, they will get a declination? Is that correct?
That is correct. So if you've, when SBA makes a determination on a loan, they do contact the applicant. Okay. The decisions about advances, those are generally made without notification.
Okay. So for those of you who haven't heard anything from SBA, but applied, have a confirmation number, then you're still in the queue. So the only advice that we have is to be patient, or to call that SBA disaster number, maybe on the weekends like Scott recommended, and see if they can track down where it's at. But one good sign that something is happening with your application is the advance. So Sunita, can you talk about what it looks like again for people when they get an advance into their account?
Sure. So when you get the advance, it usually will state it's a wire and it'll come from SBAD. So that is from your advance. You will not be notified prior to that, most likely, that you're receiving it. It just means that you got to that point. They decided that, yes, you qualify for the advance, and they're going to move your file forward. From that point to the point where it gets assigned to a loan officer or underwriter for review, that time frame is still unclear. And I don't know if Noah knows or not. If he does, I'm sure he'll let us know, but at least you know that you have passed that point and it is moving to the next point.
Thank you. And just for everybody on the call, Noah Brode is from SBA, the district office in San Francisco. We're also joined today by Heather Lutzi, our district director out of the Sacramento area. So hello to you, Heather. Thanks for joining us. Not sure if you can hear us or if you're on mute.
And real quick, so I forgot to mention, so I apologize. So there's, on this slide right here, so there's 2 financial development corporations in our region, our footprint. There's one in Oakland, which is NorCal FDC, and then there's one in Sacramento called California Capital. And to reach them, you can email us and we will get you connected with them. I forgot to mention them, so I apologize. There's one in Sacramento called California Capital, and then there's one in Oakland called NorCal FDC. And then also, real quick to Ann's comment about the loan number, and if you're in the queue and you're going to be helped, if you applied before March 29th, so Noah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you applied before March 29th and you have not heard back, whether it went through your regular email or your spam email, then you are going to have to reapply when the EIDL comes live again. So if your number, I think the cutoff, Noah, is if your number starts with a 3-3, then you need to reapply, and if your number starts with a 3-6, then you're okay. Or
The rule of thumb is if you applied before the late evening of March 29th, you should reapply.
Okay.
Because that's when the new application process went live. When you reapply, that makes you eligible for the advance, and it also puts you into a system with a lot more automation that's able to handle a larger volume of applications in a more rapid manner. So we're strongly recommending anybody who applied before that date reapply once the EIDL applications reopen.
Okay. There are some questions about whether or not SBA will be reopening the portal. I know that the timing is still up in the air. Noah or Heather, do you have any updates on that?
Unfortunately, we don't. Noah, unless you've heard something this morning, I have not. We're thinking it's going to happen anytime. We will definitely communicate that out once we hear it. But as far as I know, no, it has not opened yet.
Okay. If somebody got in advance, like Sunita was describing earlier, into their checking account, does that mean that their EIDL was or is approved?
just means that their EIDL advance was approved. The EIDL loan is still being processed.
Right. So it doesn't mean that the EIDL was or is approved, but at least you do have an inclination about whether or not it's in the queue and they are looking at it. So hopefully that answers your question, Scott. Kent is saying that he was rejected by PayPal for PPP because of too many credit report polls, most of which were generated by PPP and EIDL apps. A new credit card in the last 12 months as well through PayPal, and balance is too high on 2 of my credit card accounts. I thought that credit considerations were supposed to be secondary for most of the approval. Where do I turn now since no EIDL is available?
So I haven't heard, and I'm not sure if Sunita has, or Noah or Heather has heard. I haven't heard of somebody being declined for too many inquiries. That's a new one that I'll have to check up on.
It sounds like a combination of all of the factors that he was talking about rather than just that one.
Yeah, so if I were him, I would email.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, it's really prudent for potential borrower or applicants to, you know, research who they're applying with, because each lender is going to have their own set of criteria on top of what SBA's criteria is. So just keeping that in mind, perhaps that this is a PayPal thing, or, you know, maybe a traditional bank wouldn't have those requirements.
Right. So if they may want to go to their banking institution, you know, if it is a B of A or Wells Fargo or a Chase, they are large banks, and we don't know if they'll be able to move forward with them or not. They could go to the list and try a bank. Maybe T-Bank would be an option for them.
Okay. Dawn is asking in regards to PPP, is it correct that there will be no reduction in loan forgiveness if a part-time employee refuses to come back and those hours are given to another part-time employee?
So that statement is false.
Okay.
So if they had a part-time employee that refused to come back to work, but they hired another part-time employee and used that money for that part-time employee, then it could be forgivable, right, Noah?
Yeah, there's not a requirement that PPP funds go to a specific employee or a specific, yeah, that they're headcount and expense driven. And it's, you know, if you hired a replacement employee, or if you had a different individual that was receiving the PPP funds through their payroll expenses, that would be eligible.
Okay. This is Don Rose, by the way, Scott, so you should connect with him offline. He's saying that the National Law Review states FTE count will be used to determine workforce reductions for the purposes of calculating reductions in loan forgiveness.
So Don Rose needs to call me personally, since he has my cell phone. Leave us alone on this webinar.
I would also add to that detailed guidance around the forgiveness portion of the PPP has yet to be released by the Treasury Department and SBA. So, you know, we're getting a lot of questions about, you know, here is my specific scenario with forgiveness and how I'm sharing to use the funds. And there's also lots of reasonable organizations that are putting together, you know, reasonable and prudent guidance for how to approach this. But the real answer is that guidance has not been released. And there, you know, in terms of like the nitty gritty on forgiveness, you know, basically there isn't guidance as of this morning. Aside from, you know, the advice we have is to work closely with your lender, because it will be with your lender that you're that they will be applying for forgiveness, and also to document and to document well how you're spending the PPP funds, and to inform your lender what your plan is for them.
Okay. Pete is saying that he hasn't been able to get this question answered. If he were to get $300,000 from PPP, but can't bring back employees to work because they're not allowed in the building, if he only spends $200,000 on payroll, can he spend $50,000 on other things like rent and utilities and give the rest back? Or is there a penalty for not using 75% of the $300,000 on payroll?
Hey, Noah, do you know if there'll be, because obviously they can give as much money back as they want. There's no prepayment penalty.
There's no prepayment penalty, and we, you know, the understanding I have is that there is that forgiveness is proportional to expenses that are made towards payroll. So if you don't hit the 75% threshold, you still be eligible for some form of forgiveness. But we don't have the details on exactly, you know, how that proportionality will be determined.
They can also pay them to stay at home. So if they can only work 5 hours and they have to stay home the 3 hours, then they can still be paid for that 8-hour day. So you also have to keep
That's
that.
a great point, Sunita.
Thank you. Yeah, you can keep that in mind that, you know, you can still use up that payroll that way, even though you can't pay them for a full day because they're not working a full day. You can still pay them the rest of it as if they were.
Okay. Anurag is saying our bank says our PPP application has been submitted to SBA, but it's not been given an SBA loan number. Does this mean that PPP will get funded, or is it still iffy?
So that means that the bank is not telling them the truth, first of all. So, well, I mean, bluntly. So keep in mind here that the way that this program works is that it's a guarantee program to the lending institution. The lending institution then comes to SBA and obtains a funding number. There's no vetting that occurs from SBA prior to that lending institution obtaining that funding number. It's all done electronically. So if they're saying that it's been submitted to SBA and they haven't heard yet, they're not necessarily being forthcoming. It's really up to the lending institution to say yes or no to that applicant based on the eligibility of that applicant. And we hear this all the time.
Thank you, Heather. I don't know that it's been as clearly stated like that before. And so I think that that's really important for people to understand and advocate for themselves and try to get to the bottom of you know, what's really happening. Cynthia is saying, I'm a one-person sole proprietor. I received the $1,000 EIDL advance. My application was done on March 30th. I have not heard back from SBA as to getting a larger loan. Should I be contacting them again, or will someone be contacting me? I'm also a bit confused, as 1,000 is the max they would allow as a sole proprietor with no employees. So Cynthia, we don't have any additional information to offer other than what we had said up front regarding, you know, having to wait. You will get a declination letter if you do have one. One thing I was going to ask you, Noah, you'd sent out to SBDCs like some examples of why somebody might be declined. Was there any that Scott had mentioned? Was there any on your list that Scott didn't mention?
For what?
Like reasons for a decline?
For a decline, yeah.
I mean, so that language is you know what majority of applicants will receive. You know, the loan officers have, you know, discretion to approve and deny loans as well. You know, and they're I won't say that is 100% inclusive of all of the reasons. You know, I know that, you know, like if you're on you know, like if you're on like you know, barment from receiving federal funds lists, you know, you might get declined as well. There's like a few different reasons, but the majority of the reasons that were in that letter and in the presentation that you presented were accurate.
Okay. Scott, you mentioned student loans, and so there's some clarification that was being asked about student loans in regards to EIDL and PPP. When you said that if they have student loans, did you mean if they have student loans in default, that would be a disqualification? Not necessarily if they just had a student loan, right?
Yes, it's a student loan is a federal loan. So if you go delinquent on it or you default on it or it charges off, then it's a federal lien on your credit for life. And if you're one of those individuals, then you will not qualify for the PPP or the EIDL. But if you have a student loan and you're paying on it, or you have a student loan and you're still in school and it's deferred or whatever, and it's still in good status, you're okay. Just if you have one that's defaulted, you're not okay.
Okay. Tara is saying that as a sole proprietor in 2019, there was a large equipment purchase, large investment that was made in the business. My line 31 doesn't really represent my typical income. Does this kind of situation get addressed in the application for the loan?
That's something that they should talk to the lender about. I don't believe it does. So they'll have to bring that into play. Also provide their previous years. So have some backup to show that it's not indicative of what your normal income is or was. So that way you could possibly, write a letter, talk to the lender and see if they're going to be able to add that back in or not for that year. You may have to have some documentation to evidence that, where the money was spent, and it's not going to happen again.
Yep.
Okay. There were a few people who had mentioned in the questions that they had applied for services with the SBDC and they hadn't heard back, or they were wondering about what the next steps are. Just a few quick answers to that. If you've applied for services with the SBDC and you haven't got a quick response, I do encourage you to contact me directly at acj1@humboldt.edu. I will work with the center director to find out where you're at in the queue. I'm also an interim director for the Contra Costa and San Mateo SBDC. So those I would handle directly anyways. So if there's any question out there about how long it's taking or something like that, I want to be able to help you get an answer to that right away. So contact me directly. Alan, would you mind just putting my email in the chat for people so that they know? Also, you are looking for answers to questions regarding other business needs outside of financing. The Ask SBDC call line is not necessarily the best way to go. If you go to norcalsbdc.org and look for the SBDC location near you, that would be where you would contact to get those answers. And so although we're really focused on helping everybody with answering COVID questions right now, we are continuing to do business in helping startups and people who are looking to pivot their business to try to be prepared for when they can reopen their doors. Those are all things that your local SBDC can help with, okay? So just wanted to make sure that I answer those questions as well. I didn't get a chance to ask you directly, Heather, other than the EIDL portal, which I know you don't have any new information on, is there any other new information that you've heard from SBA in the last couple of days that might be of interest to folks on the call?
Sure. So within the refunding of the CARES Act, there were specific allocations for small to mid-sized lending institutions. And the reason for that was just basically so the big banks didn't, control the funding of that program. So with that said, as of yesterday afternoon, small banks were actually the big recipient of a majority of the funds that had went through the PPP program. And to further that, we actually just got messaged actually at 10:36 this morning with respect to our automated systems. At this point, we are limiting the ability for lending institutions that are in excess of $1 billion to obtain those loan numbers. So with this, the SBA and Treasury value all lenders and their small business customers. And to ensure access to the PPP programs for the smallest of lenders and their small business customers, starting at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard today through 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard, SBA systems will only accept loans from lending institutions with assets less than $1 billion. So we're going to try to do this kind of periodically to ensure that those smaller lending institutions have are put on an even playing field with the big boys. And a lot of the larger banks and financial institutions have automated systems. They have API protocols that can communicate directly with our systems to obtain those loan numbers. Well, it really puts the smaller businesses or smaller banks or credit unions at a disadvantage because our systems are then consumed by, you know, all of this rapid fire from the larger institutions. So this is something that just came out today. Again, it's just, you know, for a few hours today. We'll see how it works. This reserve processing time applies today only, but we may look at this and reserve some similar protocols in the future. So that's something that's, you know, brand new. Again, 10:36 today, so hot off the presses.
Thank you so much, Heather. Now, what if somebody has their PPP application turned into one of those big banks already? Would this be, you know, reason enough to withdraw their PPP application or and try to go with a smaller bank? Like, I can see some people potentially trying to do that to increase their chances. I just don't want them to get themselves into a position.
Well, and that's a really good point, Anne. You know, something to keep in mind here is that regardless of the size of the lending institution that the small business is going to, there's still a vetting process that has to take place. That institution has to obtain not only a Paycheck Protection Program application, but then all of the ancillary documents as well, depending on what they're requiring. From SBA's standpoint, any institution that comes to us and requests through, again, that electronic process, the loan number to fund that loan, we as SBA anticipate or assume that that lender has already done their due diligence. So from this standpoint, I would not advise a small business to pull their transaction from, say, as your analogy said, like a Wells Fargo, and put it with, you know, ABC Bank around the corner. There's not enough time, and it's definitely a timing issue. So I'm hesitant to say move in that direction, but keep your options open is how I would answer that.
Okay, thank you. Kyle is saying that most sole props deduct so many expenses from their profit that line 31 is very low, if not negative. Are there any other ways to calculate income for PPP?
Not that we know of. They're going to look at your Schedule C, and they're going to look at the line 31. And yes, you know, this is something that keeps coming up, and we have not found any other answers from any of the lenders if they're doing anything different, or from SBA. Line 31 is where they're going to look at, and that's what they're going to divide out. Maybe moving forward, it is something that you'll want to talk to the people that are doing your bookkeeping, accounting, and maybe relooking at expenses and everything else. And I'm sure we'll have webinars going forward on best practices.
Okay.
And then, Sunita, to your point too, I'm sorry, Anne, I don't mean to interrupt, but just to your point, kind of keep in mind that in normal times, I mean, clearly we're not in normal times, but in normal times, any lending institution is going to look at your bottom line. And if you're writing everything off, which, you know, it's a double-edged sword. You write everything off, but then you can't qualify for financing. So really, you know, keep that in mind moving forward. Try to be balanced in your approach to your income taxes, and your financial advisor or accountant should be advising you in that fashion.
And then also, if you have not filed your 2019 taxes yet, now is the time to, you don't have to file to apply for the triple P, but you should at least get together with your tax accountant or bookkeeper, CPA if they're available, and do a draft Schedule C for 2019, to where you could do potentially the opposite of what we were talking about, where you write everything off, but you actually show a good profit. Obviously, you have to pay taxes on that, and that's with you and your tax accountant. But if you have not filed your 2019 taxes yet, now is the time to do a draft Schedule C that will show a better picture where you don't write everything off so that you can qualify for more.
Okay. Sandra is asking, can you change a 1099 employee to a W-2 for the PPP to cover for the 75% repayment requirement? Any answer to that?
Yeah, Noah, what are you going to say to that?
Yes. I mean, yeah, I mean, in the sense that, you can hire somebody. I think there's two questions there. One is, can you count the expenses, can you count a 1099 expense when you're calculating the maximum size of your PPP loan? The answer to that is no. 1099 expenses should not be included in that calculation. But once you've received your PPP funds, how can you spend them? Well, if you wanted to convert a 1099 employee to a W-2 employee, and then use your PPP funds to pay for those payroll expenses, then yes, you could do that. That's the same idea as hiring a new employee. Hiring a new employee with the PPP funds. It's an eligible payroll expense.
Okay. Sandra is also asking, can an owner draw from an S-Corp account for the PPP?
So yeah, so that's kind of fits into that bucket of self-employed folks and other applicants. And the answer is it does depend on how you filed taxes in the prior year, but yes, owner draw is there's a cap on it. It has to be an 8. What's essentially, they'll look at what was on your taxes from the prior year and look at what essentially 8 weeks of that was, and you're eligible to draw that 8-week period.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point, Noah, too, because we will look at historical draws. So if you haven't taken a draw previously, we would not consider that moving forward.
Mickey is saying, is it true that I cannot get both the EIDL and the PPP? And the answer to that is no, that is not true. There are lots of our clients throughout NorCal that have absolutely received both, and they're not necessarily designed to be mutually exclusive. So there's the answer for that. I was told by the SBDC that advances, and this is somebody's name I can't pronounce. I was told by the SBDC that advances are still payouts even though the loan is denied. Is there a better way to confirm the advance payment date? My business account is verified and correct. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think what they're asking is, regardless of the outcome of the determination on the EIDL, can they get the advance? And the answer would be yes, depending on how many employees you have, up to $10,000.
Okay. Let's see. Leonard is saying, I just received $1,000 from EIDL. How soon should I expect to see an email regarding to complete the loan application? We don't know. Is the $1,000 a grant? If I don't actually get approved, do I need to return the $1,000?
No, and we do not consider it a grant. We consider it a forgivable loan or forgivable advance. There's specific regulations surrounding grants, and that's why we title this as a forgivable advance.
Heather, is this forgivable advance taxable?
It is not. That's a great question, but no, it is not taxable.
Okay. Kendra is saying if a borrower spends 75% on payroll, 10% on other eligible expenses, and 10% on non-eligible expenses, which part isn't forgivable?
Anything that is outside of payroll and rent, utilities, and interest debt payments is not forgivable. If you spend more, so that's the easy answer. If you spend more than 25% on rent, utilities, and interest payments, it's not going to be forgivable. The portion that's above 25%. And if you spend less than 75% on payroll costs, it's not going to be fully forgivable. So it's a hard question to just ask one question.
If we've been given an SBA loan ID starting with a 4, is that valid? You had mentioned on previous call that the number needs to start with a 3. If we've been given an SBA loan ID and reserved amount, does that mean we will get the PPP loan?
So I think we're getting lost in 2 different loan programs here. So there's 2 different things happening. The economic injury disaster loans would have started initially when it was rolled out with a number in the 2000s. The beginning of it would have been in the 2000s. In the subsequent rollouts of that program, it should be a 3,000 or 3,600. The PPP is a completely different program. And that actually, through the funding numbers that are going through ETRAN, potentially could have a 4,000 number. But again, 2 different programs running simultaneously.
Thank you. Valerie is asking if we're going to be discussing the unemployment for sole proprietors, the PUA program. Does anybody know anything about that we can share?
It did go live yesterday, so please go on to the website edd.ca.gov and you can apply there.
Okay. When we receive the advance, so this is from Martin, what's the best thing to do on our end in terms of accounting for the advance or the PPP to make sure it's forgiven? So Martin, this is a case again where those 2 programs, the EIDL and the PPP, are being confused. The advance is the forgivable loan portion. There are no special requirements in terms of the way that money has to be spent. Is that correct, Noah?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's automatic. It's not something you need to apply for either. So the advance, just, you don't have to pay back the funds that you receive under the advance. For the PPP, there's not a prescriptive, here is how you should document spending these funds in order to qualify for forgiveness. You will have to apply to receive it in that case. I think the SBDC, I think the SBDC might have some, Scott, you might have some recommendations, or Sunita, you might have some recommendations for how business owners should approach using these funds and documenting them. That's really kind of in the advising stage on how they're using those funds, though.
So best practices would be to have your accounting person, or if you are the accounting person, keep all your receipts, keep all of that documentation, and make sure it's handy, because after the 8 weeks, the lender is going to request documents showing how you spent that money. So you have to be able to document how you spent the money. If it's on payroll, you can show that you paid the payroll with that money. If you paid rent, put it, make sure it's a check from that account, spending that money. Have an Excel sheet, have it, printed out. That way, when you take it to the lender, a lender will also probably give you some advice on how they want to see this. This information also, with the forgiveness portion of it, is still coming out as well. So what the lender is telling you may change a little bit, and also what we're telling you, because things change all the time. we're flying as we're building the plane type of thing. So, but best practices is to document everything that you do with that money.
Another best practice is to meet with your lender and or your bank and open a separate account for EIDL and a separate account for Triple P, so that the funds are run out of two different accounts. It may be a lot for you to manage, but that way you know what you spent and you don't have to go back and reconcile all that. It's going to be a mess. The EIDL and the Triple P, you're allowed to have both, but you're not allowed to spend both on the same purpose. And I recommend that you spend all the Triple P on payroll, 100% on payroll, or as much as you can to 100% on payroll, and spend the EIDL for everything else.
Okay, being joined by Oscar here, Oscar Garcia, who is with the SBDC program as an affiliate. Can you pipe in with the information you were going to share, Oscar?
Yeah, good morning. This is Oscar Garcia with the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. One of the things that we're doing with people that receive the PPP, they're sending register letters to the employees telling them that their job is available, and they have to respond within 3 days, and they have to be a registered letter. The reason why EDD is sending them a letter to the employer stating, well, your employee that worked for you applied for unemployment. So in order for them to actually document the fact that they offered the job, we are sending registered letters to the employee asking them to reply within 3 days whether they accept the job or not. Because that way they're going to actually have the verification in place and they can go ahead and hire somebody else. So if they refuse the job, then she will report on the letter that was sent to her by EDD, the employer, then says my employee refused this job. So they won't even get the job and they won't probably get the unemployment. So that's what we're doing to protect the employer.
Okay, thank you for that. We're at 11:27. We don't have much time left. Let's see if there's any additional weeks or additional questions. So what if by the time we get the PPP funds, the 8 weeks end after 6/30? Can you address that? Because the 6/30 date has been talked about a bit, Sunita and Scott. Is there any advice here?
They were hoping that date, that everything would be funded by that date. And, we all know there's so many applications that it's just not going to be possible. The 8 weeks starts the date you receive the money. If you receive the money today, your 8 weeks start today.
Great. So hopefully that was really clear for everybody.
And somebody put into something that was new, a news report where a senator reported that the rehire of staff can be extended if you document that you offered the jobs back and they refused. So I don't know if that is just something that was that the senator was coming up with them off the top of their head, but it was apparently on the news this morning, and so I thought I'd share that with you folks as well.
I'd advise until it's up on the Treasury website and until it's published on the Treasury website and SBA to stay with those published guidelines, because there'll always be further details and deeper clarifications, and that's really the authoritative source in rulemaking for the programs.
Great.
Thank you for that. No, I really appreciate it, because I know a lot of advisors and people that work at SBDC, we hear so many different, and all of our clients, things on the news that it confuses everybody. And unless it comes from those two sources, I would just advise all of us just to stay still and until that information is given by Treasury and SBA to not
really,
forget memory.
Yeah. I mean, even when you're hearing updates from local elected representatives sometimes the local elected representatives, at a public forum, they over summarize a particular program, or they state one element about a program that is maybe not the full picture of what the rulemaking encompasses, or maybe they leave out portions while giving a public speech. And so I think really the authoritative rulemaking and guidance, which is informed by electeds, is what ends up on the Treasury and the SBA website.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. That'll have to be the last word. It is 11:31. We will be back on Friday. Thank you to Oscar for joining us late. Thank you to SBA and Scott and Sunita and our lovely British host, Alan. Have a great day, everyone. Be safe. We will see you next time.
And the final,
Thank you.
anyone who needs it, the presentation could be downloaded. Put a link to it in the chat several times, but it's there right now as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.